Hi, my name is Neal Hirsig. I come from North Reading, Massachusetts, and I teach Fundamentals of 3D Design course at Tufts University, which is just outside of Boston. Now, I've been using Blender software for the past 2 years as the major software for my 3D design class. And I'm very happy to report that for both myself and my students, I can say that it's an absolutely wonderful platform, not only to learn three-dimensional design, but also to teach three-dimensional design. Now, many of my students are civil engineering design students. They're interested in designing bridges and highway overpasses and city infrastructure. Some of my students are architectural design students. They're interested in designing office buildings and homes. And some of my students are archaeology majors. They're interested in studying the structures of ancient civilizations. Now, all of these students have the same need, and that is to be able to place their Blender models into some sort of geographical context. And Google Earth, which I have here on the screen, provides that geographical context. For those of you who haven't used Google Earth before, Google Earth is a free standalone application that displays satellite imagery of the entire Earth. It also has a user interface that allows you to move from one location on Earth to another. Now, it's only been within the last couple of months, actually, that all the software has come together to be able to easily place textured Blender models into Google Earth environment and to save those as a Kmz file so you can share it with other people. I think that by doing this, however, it greatly enriches the appreciation and the understanding of the Blender model itself because it gives it a geographical context. So, as part of an introduction to this demonstration, let me take you on a short Blender Google Earth tour to perhaps give some sort of geographical context to why I'm here today. I said that I come from North Reading, Massachusetts. Actually, specifically, I come from 33 North Street in North Reading, Massachusetts. North Reading is on the east coast of the United States, past New York City, and just to the northwest of Boston is a little village of North Reading. And at the corner of Janus Street and North is my house. So this is a Blender model. This is a model that I did in Blender, a quick model of my house, and put it into Google Earth. Google Earth allows you to orbit around your model and zoom in and zoom out. You see there's my bird feeder in the backyard. And you can pan and tilt and, let me pan this, and tilt it, and zoom in and zoom out. Google Earth also allows you to place, let me get to the front here, and zoom out. Google Earth also allows you to place a special element inside of the model that you can annotate it and give it more information. That's called a Google Earth Placemark. And for a Placemark, I've used this little icon of Blender and called it Neal's house. And if you click on this icon, it actually allows you to place HTML information so that you can add images or links or formatted text to annotate your model as well. So here I've just done a real image of my house. Now, I haven't modeled the inside of my house. However, if you can go right inside, there you go. You can actually go inside your model as well. So you could design something very large and then place things inside of that as well. As you can see, my carpet looks an awful lot like my front lawn. As a matter of fact, you can see from my neighborhood here that I have the greenest lawn in the neighborhood. So this is where I was last Sunday afternoon at this time. This is where I was sitting. But today, we are quite a ways away from North Reading, crossing the Atlantic Ocean, past Ireland and the UK and France and Belgium, into the Netherlands, to the beautiful city of Amsterdam, to Newmarket Square, and here's a Blender model of this building, actually. This was kind of strange because I did this Blender model. This is actually another quick Blender model of this building without ever having laid eyes on it before. I was able to get the floor plan from Google Earth because it shows the satellite imagery pointing straight down. So I was able to see the outline of the building and all the towers and everything and how it was all put together. And then I extrapolated from that and did all the elevations from images that I found on the net. I was kind of surprised when I got here how close it actually was, because the whole building is not available on net. I just had to guess at a lot of things. I did a placemark here as well, and I used my little Blender icon as well, and I call it 2006 Blender Conference, DVAG. And for the annotation, I just took the information that was on the Blender site about the conference, and so you can add links and text information. I did this so that you could see that placing Blender models in Google Earth can be also used as an advertising means or a means of informing the public about a certain event or the place that a certain event takes place. Very much like Google Maps is used nowadays in a lot of websites. They'll have a Google map, but now you can also put Google Earth and actually put your model inside of it. Yes?
But it's now in your program, right?
Yes, this is in Google Earth.
So I could see it from my computer.
If I give you the Kmz file, you can see it. Then you can put that Kmz file into your Google Earth. I have it saved. I have these three models, the My House and the VAG and the next model, which is the Step Pyramid. I have them saved inside of my copy of Google Earth. However, the Kmz files, which is the file that Google Earth reads, that's going to be freely available. And you can download it from any site or my site or get it off of the Blender site. Or you can publish your own Kmz files, yes.
You can also publish it inside Google?
No, you cannot. Google Earth has its own warehouse of stored files called the Google Earth Warehouse, and it's stacked with Kmz files. But unfortunately, at this point in time, the only way to get your file inside of that public warehouse is to do it through Google Earth's own proprietary 3D design program called SketchUp. If you could create your model in SketchUp and place it into Google Earth through SketchUp, then you can actually place it into their 3D warehouse. But unfortunately, at this point, outsiders like Blender modelers can't get their models into the Google Earth warehouse. Perhaps, if this catches on, some enterprising Blender enthusiast will create a Blender site that will be able to have people store their Blender models in this format as well. Here's the DVAG, and Google Earth actually provides some fairly decent resolution imagery for most of the populated areas of the United States, and it's actually the world, actually. For a city like Amsterdam, you can actually see cars and boats, and you can actually see that there's people walking around. The resolution isn't too bad when you're inside of a city. Once you guys start getting into the country, you start getting into remote areas, the resolution becomes worse and worse and worse. So the process of going from Blender to Google Earth, what I'm going to use as a demonstration is the Kukulkan Step Pyramid that's located in Chichen Itza in the Yucatan Peninsula. And let me fly you there, back across the Atlantic, into the Chichen Itza area of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Here's another very simple model of the Kukulkan Step Pyramid. And I again used a Blender icon for the Placemark, and you click on it. Sometimes it's hard to get it. Come on. There we go. I just put a picture of the real thing along with some text and a link. So this is what we're going to do today is create this setup right here. So the first step in this process is really to make sure that you have all the right software. And perhaps this is the hardest step, is getting all this software together. First of all, you do need the latest edition of Blender 2.42a. However, you will need to download the latest version of the Collada export function, DAE function, and you can go to their site, the Collada Blender Illusoft.com site, and download the latest Collada 1.4 plugin. The version that comes with the downloadable version of Blender right now, I think, is version 2.65. And they've gone through a lot of versions since then. And the one that works, finally, the one that works with Google Earth is version 3.108. So you're going to need to download this, and because this is a Python script, it's actually a zip file, and you'll unzip this and put it into your blender.blender/scripts directory. So you make sure that you have this particular collage export file in there. You're going to need Google Earth, the latest edition of Google Earth as well. And right now, the latest edition of Google Earth is version 4.0.2091, which they say is listed in beta format right now. You do need the 2091 version. The earlier version of this does not work. So I'm telling you, this really happened all within the last couple of months. In fact, when I first proposed this demonstration, this was going to be a KML coding session, because at that point, a couple months ago, the only way you could actually get Blender models into Google Earth was to write your own KML or Keyhole markup language coding and putting that coding together to put your model in. Since then, Google Earth is upgraded, Blender is upgraded, and the collage export is upgraded. And so now you can do the whole thing without having to code at all, which for people like me is absolutely wonderful. So you need the latest edition of Google Earth as well. Because this is a Python script, the collage export file is actually Python, you're going to need Python 2.43 installed in your computer as well. Now, Python is upgraded to a 2.5, and I've tried this with the 2.5 version, and it does not work with 2.5. The collage export file does not work with the new Python 2.5. You get a path error if you try to export, and I'm just not clever enough to figure out how to get around that path error. But it does work with Python 2.43, so you'll need that version. I assume that in the later versions of collage export, they'll fix that bug. So once you have all the right software together, it is very, very easy to place your Blender model into Google Earth. In fact, it's embarrassingly easy. So the first step is usually to obtain a footprint before you start your modeling, to obtain a Google Earth footprint of where you intend to place your model. For instance, if I were going to do a model of the pyramids in Egypt, I might put into the Google Earth search button here, Cairo, Egypt, and go search for that, and it would take me to Cairo. I'm going to stop this right here. Just southwest of the city of Cairo, on the Giza Plain, are the Great Pyramids. And here I'm going to center this Great Pyramid here inside my screen. And so what you might want to do is get a footprint image of this from Google Earth so that you can put that into Blender and use it as a background image so that you're able to model it. You can grab this image either by, if you have a screen capture utility, you can screen capture it. You can also, inside of Google Earth, do File, Save, and save the image if you want. And once you have that image, you can go into Blender. Let me open up my Blender here. And go to View, Background Image, Use Background Image, and then search for that file. And mine's in Giza. Footprint. So here's the image from the Giza Pyramid that I use as a background, so now I can start my modeling based on that ratio of length to width of the building itself. In Google Earth, there's also a utility, a measurement utility that works pretty well, actually. It comes in handy, called a ruler. And you can set your measurements to, like, I might use feet, and then click on one corner of the pyramid here and the other corner of the pyramid. And it says that it's 743.25 feet. It's not bad. It's actually more like 750 feet. But it can give you an indication of the real-life scale of whatever it is you happen to be modeling. Now, if you already know the dimensions of whatever building or whatever it is you're modeling, or if you don't care what the dimensions are, because you can actually you can model anything that your imagination can take. You can do Santa's Village and place it in the North Pole. You can redo the lost continent of Atlantis and place it in the middle of the ocean. Or you can redesign the entire city of Amsterdam if you like and place it in. So if you don't need those measurements and if you don't need that information, this first step that I'm showing you about getting a footprint might not become necessary. The next step is actually the Blender model itself. And modeling, oops, yeah.
Did you choose the orientation to be north or?
Well, the pyramid just happens to be north and south. To be honest with you, what you probably should do is, because it doesn't make any difference what direction or angle your model is when you bring it into Google Earth, it's best to if you're going to take a footprint, to take your footprint north and south, not necessarily north and south, but so that it's straight on to you as you want to model it. When you bring a model into Google Earth, it's automatically, the front view in Blender is going to be the south view in Google Earth. The Control 1 view, or the back view in Blender, is going to be the north side, no matter what, no matter how you've done it. So you might as well create your Blender model straight on using global axis rather than having to put it at an angle and work with local axis when you're building your model. There are quite a number of considerations in Blender, because creating a model in Blender that's destined for rendering, or destined for rendering as a still image or a video, part of a video, is much, much different than creating a Blender model that's destined for Google Earth. The first consideration is scale. Now, it doesn't make any difference what scale you actually build your model in. One Blender unit equals a foot or a meter or whatever you want to make it. Because once you take your model into Google Earth, you're going to be able to scale the whole thing up as a whole. So it doesn't make any difference what scale you do to begin with. However, it's a very, very good idea to make your models, scale your models in Blender at as large a scale as possible that you can handle, or that Blender can handle for that matter. The reason for this is that the scale difference between Google Earth and Blender is vast. When you bring in a model into Google Earth, if you make it too small, it's going to be a little tiny black dot. And you're going to have to search for that little tiny dot so that you can get it and grab it and scale it up. So the bigger you can make your model to begin with, the easier it's going to be to find once you bring it into Google Earth. Next consideration is the camera. Google Earth does not import any camera information at all, so you might as well delete it from your Blender model to begin with. It's just not going to show up at all. Lighting objects are not imported into Google Earth. You might as well get rid of all those lighting instruments as well. The next is all shader information is not imported into Google Earth. So there's no diffuse shadows, there's no specular highlights, there's no mirrors, there's none of that stuff that you might normally do to be able to render something in Blender. None of that's going to be imported into Google Earth anyway. Google Earth is a very flat, ambient world. Every object in Google Earth is lit from all sides with the same intensity. And so things are very, very flat. However, Google Earth will import RGB color values. But even when you're dealing with RGB color values, there's some things to concern yourself with. What I've done here is I've done some test setups where I've taken very simple objects in Blender and then brought them into Google Earth so that you could see the difference between how an object looks like in Blender as opposed to how it looks like in Google Earth. And here I've just done a simple cube, and I've assigned RGB value of red 1 and green 0 and blue 0. On the left, it shows what it looks like in Google Earth in the solid 3D viewport, and on the right is that same cube in Google Earth. Now, you can't tell very well from this particular image up here, but on my computer, on my screen, when it actually is in Google Earth, this is much, 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 much brighter in color than what it looks like in Google Earth, in Blender. And you'll find that colors are much brighter when you import them into Google Earth. Here I have the same cube at 0.5 red, and this is what it looks like in Google Earth. So make sure that when you're putting colors in your model in Blender, take into consideration that all those colors are going to look much brighter when you finally bring it into Google Earth. Google Earth will allow you to import multiple materials. Here's a cube on the left that has multiple material attached to the faces, blue, cyan, and yellow. And this is what it looks like in Blender, and here's what it looks like in Google Earth. So you can use multiple materials on a single object, but again, those colors are going to be much, much brighter. Next is Google Earth will, unfortunately, not allow you to import any RGB textures, any Blender textures at all. On the left here is a cube with an RGB texture on it. It's in box form, and this is what it looks like. It looks like a white cube in Google Earth. However, you can import UV map textures. And so all of your textures that are in Blender have to be UV mapped textures to be able to be imported into Google Earth. On the left here is a cube with a brick UV map. This is what it looks like in a textured 3D viewport, and here's what that same cube looks like in Google Earth when it's imported. By the way, the background here for this Google Earth is actually the outfield of Fenway Park, which is the home of the Boston Red Sox. But you would know that. So this becomes very, very important, putting UV mapped textures in your Blender model that it's destined for Google Earth. The reason for this is because Google Earth is such a flat and ambient world that the only way that you can really get a sense of three-dimensional volume is to be able to apply textures so that you have edges of things and it shows mass. If you do this if you do things with just plain color, everything looks very, very flat. So it's important to place a lot of UV map textures into your model so it does look three-dimensional. A couple things about these textures. First of all, they're all single-sided, so all the textures that are brought in will only be single-sided, which makes it very important that all of your normals are facing outward. And so it's a good idea to select all those objects, bring them into edit mode, select all the vertices, and press Control-N, and make sure that all of your normals are facing outward, because otherwise it will not show up in Google Earth. Next has to do with the pathway to the image file when you're working in Blender. All of the paths have to be relative, and so your image files that you're using in the UV mapping have to be placed in the same directory as the Blender model itself, because the export function is going to record that path, and Google Earth can only accept relative paths. So it's going to have to be relative to begin with, and that means you're going to have to put that image file into that directory before you apply it as a UV image, part of the UV mapping. So that's very important. And finally, when you do UV mapping in Blender, normally if it's destined to be rendered somewhere, you might create a material and click on the text face button to make that UV mapping part of that material. You cannot do that if it's going to go into Google Earth. In fact, don't press that text-faced button, because this isn't being rendered. This is simply the information is just being gathered about it and then presented in a different manner. So don't press that text-faced button. In fact, don't even make a material. Just allow all the faces that you need to have UV mapped. Next consideration is that Google Earth will not import anything other than meshes. So that means that any objects that are not real true meshes will not be imported. This becomes a problem when you're using subsurfing or lattice deformations, any curve type objects, anything like that that will not directly import unless it's a mesh. So here's an example of on the left of a subsurf object in Blender and what it looks like there, and here's what it looks like in Google Earth. The subsurfing doesn't come through. However, I discovered that if you apply the modifier, if you click on that little apply button in the modifier stack in Blender, then export it, then all that information does come through into Google Earth. And so you can do subsurfing as long as you apply the texture, or apply the subsurfing before you actually export it. Same holds true for lattice deformations. Here's Bezier circle objects. a Bezier circle object. It's not a mesh, so it will not import into Google Earth. However, if you take that and do, I think it's Alt-C, you take your mesh and do Alt-C and convert it to a mesh, then it will be imported into Google Earth. So this is what it will look like in Google Earth as opposed to the Blender viewport. Here is a lattice deformation. On the left is a sphere that has a lattice deformation on it. And this is what it looks like in Google Earth. It just looks like a sphere again, except if you apply the modifier in the modifier stack, then it will, that geometry information then will be converted and will be able to be available to Google Earth. Same thing holds true with text. With text, it's a little different. This is an extruded text on the left. And what you have to do to get that into Google Earth is you'll have to first convert it to a curve object, and then convert it to a mesh object, and then recalculate all the normals. But if you do that three-step process, all of that will be imported then into Google Earth. Surprisingly, and this kind of shocked me, Google Earth will import alpha values that with Z transparency from your Blender model into Google Earth. This was really surprising, but you can see on the left here is a cube on a plane in Blender with the alpha set at 0.25 and Z transparency, and then on the right is that same cube in Google Earth and how it looks like there. And it's surprising that information actually followed through. And finally, this is just another reminder that UV map textures are single-sided. And so here I have two planes, one on top of the other, in Blender. And here's these same two planes in Google Earth, UV map textures, looking at it from the north view, but when you turn that around, looking at it from the south view, that whole object completely disappears because only the normal faces will show. So those are all considerations that you should have when you're making your Blender model to begin with. The next step, once your model is created and you've got all your UV textures, is to export that file. And I have here, I'm going to open this step pyramid file. Here's the Kukulkan step pyramid model, and I'll just put this into texture mode here just so that you can see that this is actually has its UV textures applied onto it very simply, as a matter of fact. Let me go back to wireframe. So the next step is to do the export, and to do the export you go into File, Export, and you choose the Collada 1.4 DAE, which is the name of the file type. And up pops the dialog box for the Collada export. And the first thing you'll need to do is to to name this. I'm going to name this, actually I'm going to make sure that this is in the right place so I can find it. I have a pyramid file here. I'm going to rename this something different so that it doesn't conflict with the one I already have there. I'm going to name this pyramid z.dae. After you've named your file and had a path for it, first thing is you'll need to select the triangles button, because Google Earth will not import polygon information, will only import triangular information, actually mesh information in triangular format. You can just click on the disable physics button because it's not going to be imported anyway. If there is any physics in your Blender file, it won't be imported. For that matter, there's obviously no animation as well whatsoever that can be imported. I clicked the Use Relative Paths, even though the paths that you've created in your Blender file have to be relative anyway. I would still click on this Relative Paths, and oddly enough, do not click on the Use UV Image. And let me be the first to say how difficult it is, after going through the process of UV mapping your objects, not to click on this button. But the reason, if you click on it, what this actually means is it's actually saying, do you want only UV mapped information? And so don't click on this, because if you do, any object in your model that is not UV mapped will show up as bright yellow the first time you do it, and then bright blue the second time you do it. So if you want to use any RGB color, you've got to make sure that you don't click on this button. It will import the UV mapped information without doing this, so don't click on it. Okay, so once you have this set up, you just click under Export and Close, and the export says export is successful, and so now it's exported. I'm going to take a look at that file. Here it is, Kmz DAE. You can actually open this. I'm going to open this with WordPad. So you can actually see the coding for this. This is all done in XML. And you'll see down here, here's all that good triangular information in this file. So this is the DAE file. So once you have that export file, let me go into Blender here. I'm going to close this. Next step is to put this into Google Earth. The first step is to find out where it is that you're going to put it into Google Earth. And I'm going to put this in the, I happen to know the exact longitude and latitude of where this pyramid is. So I'm going to enter that into the search line. And it's going to take me back to South America, to Mexico. And actually, since I already have a model there, I'm going to turn all of this stuff off, all of my existing models off. Okay, so here we are at that point in the Yucatan Peninsula in the Chichen Itza area. Now you can see that I said that Google Earth has fairly good resolution of all populated areas. You guys start getting into the remote jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, and the resolution is absolutely abysmal. So as you can see, you can't even tell where this pyramid happens to be by looking at this image at all. However, Google Earth is not the only satellite imagery in town. There's lots and lots of places that create satellite imagery that you can download from on the internet. Even more so, there's a lot of places that do aerial photography that you can use, that you can download on the internet. And I just happen to have downloaded, because this is a rather famous archaeological site, almost every archaeological site has aerial photographs or satellite imagery that you can download. So I actually have a copy of a site here, of this site called Overlay Image. And this is actually an aerial view of this from 1,500 feet above, and so you can see the step pyramid and where it lies. Now, Google Earth not only allows you to place three-dimensional models inside of Google Earth, but you can also place two-dimensional images in Google Earth. So we're going to, and that's called an overlay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first add to our Kmz file, we're going to first put down an image overlay. On top of that, we're going to place our 3D Blender model. So to do this, I'm going to turn off this place marker just so we don't see it. And to do this, you have to first of all go to temporary places. You cannot build your Kmz file any place other than temporary places to begin with. So you select temporary places, and I'm going to right-click that and do Add Folder. Now the reason I'm adding a folder to this is because I have three distinct elements that I'm going to place into this folder. I'm going to place in the overlay, I'm going to place in my Blender model, and I'm also going to place in a Placemark that's going to annotate the model and give some extra information about that model. So those three elements I want stacked together so that when somebody opens this up, they see all three elements together. And the way to do that is to put it all inside of a folder in Google Earth. When you do this yourselves, you will probably always want to use a folder. Perhaps only because if you use a Placemark, that's two elements right there, a model and a Placemark. And so you'll want to put those together. If you're just placing your model and nothing else but your model, you wouldn't have to create a folder. But I'm going to create a folder here. And I actually have this text file that I'm going to use so I don't have to spend time typing things in. I'm going to call this the Mayan Temple of Kukulkan. I'm just going to name that folder that and say OK. So right now, you'll see under my temporary places, I have a folder there called the Mayan Temple of Kukulkan. Now the next step is to add to that folder, I'm going to add my overlay. And to do that, I'm going to select my folder, right-click it, and do Add Image Overlay. And I'm adding that to the folder. And let me get my text thing here. I'm going to call this overlay the overlay of the Srebrenica area. And I'm going to fill in the description here. I'm just going to put in the GPS coordinates, just for people's information. And next I'm going to browse for that image file. And that's located here. Overlay. And this places that file right into Google Earth. Now, the first step is actually to set the transparency. When you first bring in an overlay, it's actually solid. But there's a slider here that you can adjust the transparency from clear to opaque. And so that you can see where this overlay is supposed to go. This particular one is very, very close to where it should be. I'm going to grab this whole overlay by clicking on these crosshairs in the middle and just move this over a little bit so that road lines up going north. And actually, this is pretty good. This is almost on the mark of where this actually is in real Earth terms. You can, however, when you bring in images, these outline arrows here, you can take this and drag this image out and make it larger, or you can drag out one side and make it larger in one dimension. And you can also, here is a rotation icon where you can click that and you can actually rotate this image. So you can adjust your overlay images, if you're using them, you can adjust those overlay images however you want. The last step in here is that I want to add a Blender icon to this overlay. I'll leave this, I'll do the Blender icon in the next one. I'll just say OK. So here under my Mayan Temple folder is the overlay of the Srebrenica area, listed down here on the right under my places. The next step is I'm going to add my Blender model. And so I want to go first to the folder and select the folder to begin with, right-click that and add to that a model. And I'm going to call this model the Mayan Temple of Kukulkan. And for the description, I'm just going to put the Srebrenica area in Mexico. Now, I need to bring in the model. And so I click on this Browse button. And what I'm looking for is that DAE file that I exported in Blender. And my DAE file was called, I want to make sure that this is, yep, this is the correct one. I called it Kmz. Remember when I exported it? And say Open. And it will load this in here, and there it is. Now, to give you an indication of really how small this is, let me zoom out here. That's really how small. That's the difference between Blender scale and Google Earth scale. And so what you have to do is zoom in and find it. And at some point when you zoom in and out, you'll see that. I don't know if you can recognize it, but there's this little yellow box that's surrounding, it's actually a cube, that'll surround your object. And these have tabs on the edges that you can grab a hold of. So I'm just going to grab a hold of one of these edges, and it turns into a star like this, and drag it out, and zoom out a little bit, grab it, drag it out. And I'm doing this scaling here so that it gets to be about the right size of the temple itself. A little bit more. Okay, so there it is, and actually I can grab a hold of it here on the crosshairs in the middle, and I can move this model any place that I want to within Google Earth. I'm going to place it right on top of the footprint of the model. I can also grab a hold of this little circular icon here and angle it to whatever angle I want. I'm going to angle it there. I think I have to move it a little bit more. And I'm going to tilt up and see what this really looks like. It's looking pretty good. It probably has to be a little bit bigger. That's pretty good. So there's my Blender model. One last step is I do want to put a Blender icon here. And what these icons do is they show up in the folder, underneath the name of this in the folder. And to do this, I click on the icon button here on the dialog box. And here are all the built-in Google Earth icons that you can use. And I'm going to go to Custom and Browse. And in that same folder, I have this little Blender icon called Blender Icon PNG file. And OK. And you'll see that it actually is going to show up here under the temporary places. And I'll say OK to this dialog box. And there's my Blender icon right here in the corner. And so now I have a folder with my temple and model and with the overlay of the image. Next step is to add a placemark. And to add a placemark, I'm going to go to the folder again, because I want to place this inside the folder. And I'll right-click and add a placemark. And this is kind of nice. Since the last icon I used was a Blender icon, it automatically picked that up and it chose that for the icon for this placemark, which is actually pretty nice. The name of this placemark is called the Temple of Kukulkan. And the description, I'm going to put in all of this HTML coding. And I have an image SRC of a picture of this that's already on the web somewhere. I have some text in here, and I have an href so that it can go to another website. So I'm going to copy that information. And I'm going to place that into the description box. So there's my Blender icon, the name, the Temple of Kukulkan. When you place a placemark, it's actually placed on the ground. So the next step is you need to get that up into the air. And you do that by clicking on the Altitude tab, and you can see that that placemark is set at 0 meters, clamped to the ground. I'm just going to grab this and pull it up into the air, like 73 meters. And actually, if you look at this, it's not centered at all. And so what I'm going to do is extend a line from that to the ground and go looking at this from the top view. I'm just going to grab this icon and place it right on top of the temple. So now it kind of sticks out of the temple. So there I've put the placemark in as well. And now underneath my folder, I have my placemark, I have the model, and I also have the overlay. All three elements are in the folder. The next step is to snapshot the actual location of this so that you get an image that you want your audience to see whenever they open this file. And to do that, you just set up whatever image that you want. For instance, I want people to look at it from this particular view right here. So what I have to do is I have to snapshot that on all of my elements. I'm going to go to the overlay first and right-click that and go to Properties, which gets me back to this dialog box. And under View, I'm going to do Snapshot Current View. This automatically sets up the latitude, the longitude of this view, the range, which is how far the camera is away from the object, the heading, which means where it's pointing in regards to north, and finally the tilt of the camera. So I've snapshotted this view. I'll say OK. And I'll go into my, this is my model, and go into View and snapshot that. I'll select the placemark, go into Properties, View, and I'm going to snapshot that. And then go to the folder and Properties, View, and snapshot that. So now whenever anybody comes to this particular site, it'll always go to this particular view. Now, I just did this to make it easy. In reality, you can add as many placemarks as you want, and maybe use placemarks with no icon whatsoever, and set the snapshot view to some other view of your model. For instance, you might have a view called North View, or South View, or Southeast View, or Top View. You can have all these views as placemarks and snapshot that view right into the Properties panel so that when people open that folder, they'll see all of these different views, and they can just click on those views, and it'll automatically show you the view that you want to see. But mine are all the same. Okay, so now we've got this folder completed, we've got the model and all the elements completed. The next step, and this is actually a very important step, is I need to transfer this folder from temporary places to what's called My Places, which is up here, My Places. And so I select the folder and I make sure that everything is checkmarked, all of the 3 elements are checkmarked, and I right-click that and I do Save to My Places. And what this does is it just moves it up from the temporary places up into My Places, which is up on top. I'm going to turn off the temporary places. And now this whole folder is listed under My Places. Once it's in My Places, I can then select that folder, right-click, and do Save As. And finally, we get to make the Kmz file. And I'm going to make sure that this is in the right place. I'm going to just call this Kukulkan, just to differentiate it from what I have up there already. I'm going to call it Kukulkan and press and save it into my folder. So now I have a Kmz file that has all of the placemark information, all of the geometry from my model, and all of the overlay information. So now I'm going to go to that file, and here it is, the Kukulkan Kmz file. And this is actually a zip file. And I'm going to open this up with zip, WinZip. And you can see that inside of this zip file is actually the stone JPEG and the Roman wall JPEG with the 2 images that I used for my UV map textures. There's the overlay image that's in there. There's the Blender icon image that I use for the Blender icons is in there. There's the Pyramid Z DAE file that I exported from Blender is in that file. There's another small file called textures.txt, and all this is a small text file that reconciles the relative path for each one of the image files, but they're all relative anyway. And finally, there's a file called doc.kml, which is a Keyhole markup language file. I'm going to just open that with WordPad just so that you can see it. And this is written in Keyhole markup language. And this is what you used to have to do a couple of months ago. If you wanted to put your Blender model, you had to write this file. You had to create this whole system. But right now, it's done automatically. And you can see here is the folder element. And here's the model. And here's the overlay. Here's the DAE file, the call to the DAE file. So this is just a small KML document that actually calls up all of these different elements together. So there we have the KMZ file. And let me go back into Google Earth. And I'm going to take this, this Mayan temple that's in My Places, and I'm going to delete it. And I make sure that I'm going to just kind of head out towards Neal's house just to get out of the area. And so now it's as if somebody else opened up Google Earth. And they have this KMZ file, access to it. All they have to do is do File, Open. And here's the Kukulkan KMZ file that we just made. Open. It'll put it under the temporary places. And it will fly to the area and display the placemark and the model and the overlay. So the next step is, what do you do with this? This KMZ file. You've got this KMZ file. It doesn't do any good when it's sitting on your hard drive somewhere. What you have to do is kind of distribute this, and this is really the hard step right now, is how do you get this to be popularized? How do you get this out there into the world? And it's something that I can't answer right now. This is good for my students because my students can show each other and they can demonstrate things to their clients, and they can demonstrate this in classes because Google Earth and Blender are both free products. And so it's very good for my students, but for the real world situation, you really need some sort of general warehouse or general site that you can place these models so that people can download them and use them inside of Google Earth. And how to do that, I really don't have the answer to that. I wish I did. These files are not too large in size. The DAE file contains all the geometry information, and that's really the largest part of this entire file. I think the file size on this Kmz file is 392, so it's not too bad for a file size. So you should be able to email it to people and things like that, but still, if there's somebody out there that wants to create a Blender Kmz warehouse, that would be absolutely wonderful. So that's the process going from Blender model to Google Earth. So, dank u wel. I'll gladly answer any questions if you have them. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sorry, yeah. Sorry.
So it's now only visible in your program, but on Google Maps, is it also visible there? Is that possible?
No, it is not. No, it is not available on Google Maps. In Google Maps, you have this ability to go from a button up on top that goes from actually a satellite view to a map view, and you can go back and forth between the two. That is actually a separate program from Google Earth. The only way to see this is to open up the application itself, Google Earth application, and put your Kmz file inside of that. From what I've read about Google Earth, however, is that other people are working on ways to be able to incorporate a Google Earth viewer so that you can create a Google Earth viewer and put that into an HTML page, just like you can with the map right now, so that you can open up your HTML page and you'd have a Google Earth viewer there, which then your Kmz file should open up inside of. But right now, it doesn't work that way. I wish it did.
If that's there, then it's not so easy to, often not so difficult anymore to
That is absolutely
do it
correct.
on the website.
Absolutely correct. It would be wonderful. Yeah.
Do you know if there's a polygon limit on objects from
There's
Blender?
what?
A polygon limit, or a size limit, or a resolution limit?
No, I was surprised at that. I tried, my house was huge in terms of the polygon count. It really was. And so is the VAG. I was kind of surprised that there didn't seem to be any limits. I've never found any documentation on any limits. For all I know, there are no limits.
So you could possibly make an object that's so large that someone's computer will just die on it when they try to view it, maybe.
That's possible. That's something totally different than Google Earth limits.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, people's computer limits. Yeah, you're right. Actually, like when you're doing this and you're going back and forth from Google Earth to Blender, I've noticed there's lots of problems with even on my computer having both of those things up and running at the same time, and doing things inside of Blender and then going back into Google Earth when I was doing those test things. It puts a strain on the computer. Also, in Google Earth, you actually need to have internet access to use Google Earth. If you don't have internet access and you open up Google Earth, it will only display imagery that happens to be in the cache, your computer's cache for Google Earth. Otherwise, you need to have an internet connection so that as you're flying places, it's actually downloading new information all the time. And that's really how you get the updates for all of the imagery, because Google Earth constantly updates its imagery for all around the world. And you never have to download that as a whole. And it doesn't come with it when you first download Google Earth. It actually comes in the fly whenever you happen to be flying around the Earth.
So when your students use this method to show buildings to clients,
Yes.
they don't have to have internet access, or maybe they do.
Most of it by that time is already in their cache, so they don't have to worry about it. But for the most part, almost every place has internet access now, wireless internet access. It's hard to find a place where you would do such a thing without having internet, to be honest with you. So it's not a big problem. Yeah.
When you want to show the inside of a box, could you create a smaller box with the normals facing inward?
Yes. In fact, that would be the only way that you would be able to do that. If you noticed when I flew into my house, you saw the grass, but you didn't see any of the walls, because those were all UV mapped walls. But you saw the windows because those were actually boxes that had RGB applied so that you could actually see the back of it as well. But yes, the way to do that would be to either do a box inside of a box and Or you can manually turn all your normals around, too. That certainly is possible. You turn them all the other way. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick comment, really. I mean, I loved your presentation, Neal, and I'm going to use what I've learnt here. Just one thing in terms of application that people might be interested in is that the website, www.bookings.nl, is a hotel booking website. And when you're booking a hotel, you can choose, you can highlight where you want the hotel to be. You can pick the radius. So for here, I found De Waag, and in Google Earth, I copied the latitude and longitude out of Google Earth into the bookings.nl website. I found hotels within a certain radius of De Waag, and when it comes up with a list of hotels, there's a button to take you back into Google Earth, which exports the Kmz file into Google Earth, and then you've got them highlighted in Google Earth, and you can find which ones you actually want. So that for me was a great application and very usable.
Absolutely wonderfully. I didn't know about that. I'll check that out. That sounds very, very interesting. It's a great way to do it. So you're going out of Google Earth and then back into Google Earth.
That's
you're
it.
using
Yeah,
Google Earth to
that's
find
what
it.
I did. Yeah. That's
great.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wonderful.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Good. What?
Yeah, check it out. And go to the.
Well, I'm in Google Earth. Go to Amsterdam. Oh, I don't have anything listed here. So now you just copied this.
So, yeah, I grabbed the latitude and longitude up there and just copy that whole string.
This one?
Yeah.
But that's not
everything.
That's not Amsterdam. That's Kukulkan Pyramid. I put that in myself.
Is it? Does it not list this one for
No, you would have to get this down here from down here where it says 52 degrees, 22 minutes, 22.38 seconds. So it happens to be wherever your cursor happens to be. It's listed down there on the bottom. You can see it changing.
Oh, I see.
So.
Well, I don't know how I did it, but.
No.
What happens if you press on?
No.
Well,
no,
anyway,
the only way I
for
can
me.
think of is you could find out because I happen to have this this model here, that in the properties in the view that has the longitude and latitude for it. That's not going to transfer directly into this line here though, at all. I know that. But now you're saying that if you have this information, in fact I can't even copy that. Control C. Oop. Yeah, I should copy it that way. So now you're saying that you would take that and put it into hotels.
I think it was bookings.nl or bookings. I think there's a bookings.com as well. I think it's the same site, same company.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that there's a lot of, Google Earth itself has a lot of software, a lot of 3D programs that are using SketchUp, and they've created a number of models already for a lot of major cities that they've displaced. So they're actually just boxes that indicate size and dimension of certain buildings. There's no textures on them at all. It is possible, by the way, if you wanted to put your model into my time's up. If you wanted to put your model into the Google Earth warehouse, it is possible to take your Blender model, select all the elements, and export it as a 3DS model, and then import it into SketchUp, and then do your model from there. The problem is that once it's in SketchUp, you're going to have to break it all apart into individual pieces, get rid of all the triangular edges. You're going to have to redo all of the imagery and all the textures and all the colors anyway, so you might as well do it originally through Blender. If any of you are interested, all the files that I used are on this CD, and I've got 20 of these CDs around. If any of you are interested, I'll give these out, and you can try any of these things, because it has my house and the VAG and the temple and all of the test results that I did from going from Blender to Google Earth. All of that's on this CD, so if you want it, come and talk to me and I'll give it to you. Okay, thank you. I'm out of time.